And joining me now for an exclusive interview is William Taylor, former US Ambassador to Ukraine. Good evening to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Good evening, Aaron. How are you?
I'm very well. I hope you are too. Let's start with what we're hearing out of Paris. A big night at the Elysees Palace. A European-led force to deliver reassurance in the air, at sea, on land. Of course, of those member states already giving their commitment to that are France and the UK. We're also hearing these reports of US-backed intelligence and logistics. Do you read this as a breakthrough tonight or just another summit declaration?
It's a strong statement. It's a strong statement of intent. These European nations have gotten together and have committed themselves to a serious effort to provide security for Ukraine after a ceasefire. And these commitments by the British and the French to actually put troops on the ground in Ukraine is a big statement, is a big step. Other nations, I understand, are also considering doing that as well. There's some Baltic states that are willing to put troops on the ground as well. So this is a major step towards security for Ukraine after a ceasefire.
How significant is that multinational force agreement that was signed tonight between France, Britain and Ukraine? This idea that France and the UK are saying, yes, once there is a ceasefire, as you say, we will have troops on the ground.
I think it's a very big deal. It's a message for Ukrainians in the first instance, that they can count on the support of the Europeans to help them secure themselves so that they can deter another Russian invasion. That's the key, how to keep the Russians from invading again. And troops on the ground from the Brits and the French and others will certainly do that. Putin knows that these are strong members of NATO. And that an attack on Britain or France in Ukraine would be a major mistake by Putin. So this is a big decision and demonstration, as I say, for the Ukrainians, but also a message to Putin. Do not consider invading again.
We've heard America's Steve Witkoff tonight talk about durable security guarantees, agreeing with the coalition that robust prosperity commitments are essential to a lasting peace in Ukraine. There have also, of course, been some reports that America has agreed to support any defence force when it comes to a potential Russian attack in the future. Do you believe that Washington would put its own soldiers at risk and deploy to Ukraine?
I do. If that's the commitment, I think the Americans understand the importance of Ukraine standing up to Russia, the importance of the United States standing with the Brits and the French and the Ukrainians and others to defend. And they understand the importance of the U.S. participation in this deterrent force. Again, Aaron, this is a deterrent force. This is to deter the Russians from invading again. And the American contribution is going to be important to that.
You raise a really good point, because I guess the question is, would Moscow take any guarantees seriously if American troops were not on the ground?
They probably will. They certainly take it seriously in the NATO context. The Russians have never attacked a NATO nation. They have attacked they've attacked Georgia and Ukraine. They have troops in Moldova.
Is that, Mr. Ambassador, because of America's strength?
It is. They understand that the Americans back up NATO, and if the Americans have now committed, as you heard Steve Witkoff say, that they're committed to supporting this coalition of the willing, that's a deterrent for the Russians.
When it comes to Poland, Warsaw has repeatedly ruled out sending any troops, talking about the fact that Poland has a contribution when it comes to logistics, when it comes to being a leader as that logistics hub for Kyiv. Is that a mistake, though, for Poland not to send troops to Ukraine?
This is a decision for the Polish government and the Polish people to make. This is not for others. Every one of those nations of the coalition of the willing, including Poland, will decide how to contribute, what to contribute, where to contribute. And this is an important decision that each government will have to make. Of course, Poland has its own defense to be concerned about, and everyone understands that. The Brits and the French don't have a border with the Russians, so they can put forces in. Others like the Baltic states, do have borders with the Russians. They're putting forces in. So that's what I say. It's up to each individual nation to make that decision.
Of course, despite all this talk tonight of security guarantees, it all comes after a ceasefire, right? So is this going cart before the horse a little bit? I mean, are we any closer in your mind to actually ending the fighting?
Ending the fighting depends, as you've indicated, as your reporters indicated, depends on Putin. Putin has to understand that he can't win this war. Putin has to understand that the Ukrainians will continue to fight and defend themselves. He now understands that the Europeans are ready to put troops on the ground and other ways to provide the support to Ukraine for its security. Putin now understands that the Americans are backing that. So that's the message to Putin. You need to realize, Putin, that you're not going to win, that this is a disaster for you to continue. That pressure on Putin is what it's going to take to get to a ceasefire.
You mentioned there that Vladimir Putin will now know that America backs Ukraine. There's been a lot of toing and froing over the last year. President Trump obviously sitting down with Vladimir Putin himself. Can Europe be confident that America, that Washington, that Donald Trump backs Ukraine right now?
I think Europeans and Ukrainians are probably taking a dual track on this, Aaron. They are counting on the Americans to do what they're saying. That the Americans are saying what Steve Witkoff said in Paris tonight, that is, we're going to be there. And they're counting on that. And President Trump has said, we're going to be there. We're going to support NATO. We're going to support Article 5, he has said. So the Europeans and Ukrainians are counting on that support continuing. But they recognize that that's not going to be there forever. The Americans are not going to be there in Europe in the same strength and same commitment forever. It's going to increasingly fall to Europeans, including Ukrainians, to defend themselves. So the dual track is work with the Americans as long as they're in, but start building up, as they've already begun doing seriously, build up strength, military industrial strength, build up the capabilities to defend Europe more and more on their own. They're doing both at the same time.
I want to explicitly draw on your previous experience as US ambassador to Ukraine. If we had Donald Trump sitting with us here tonight, what would you tell him about trying to get this war to an end?
I would say, Mr. President, if you want to end this war, as you have said over and over that you do, and Steve Witkoff just said it again today, if you want to end it, the way to do it is to put pressure on Putin. And you, Mr. President, you, President Trump, have the leverage, the capability to put pressure on Trump probably like no one else. Don't shake his hand. What you should do is put pressure on him in terms of military and in terms of economic. Choke off the flow of money to that man. Choke off the flow of funds that man, Putin, gets from selling oil and gas around the world. Choke that off. He will not be able to continue this war. And then, Mr. President, you will get what you're after. You will get this prize for ending this war by making Putin understand he cannot win.
Speaking of Donald Trump, you were quoted last year as saying the strongest security guarantee for Ukraine is NATO membership. I'm interested in your view on that tonight. Does that still stand? Because some argue that we're seeing the US president, with his Monroe push towards this Western Hemisphere dominance, effectively shatter the alliance, or at the very least threaten to shatter that alliance.
The alliance is not shattered, Aaron, as you know. The alliance is not even threatening to be shattered. What you see from the United States is today, a focus on Latin America. Today, a focus on Venezuela. Today, a focus on the Western Hemisphere. But there is a long tradition, including this administration, of focusing on Europe. It can do two things at once. It can do three things at once. It can focus on Europe. It keeps its eye on China. And it can focus on the Latin American countries that we're in today. So it is certainly possible to do, but NATO will continue to exist, continue to defend Europe. And the United States, as I say, even this President Trump, has indicated that he supports NATO. That will continue. And yes, I do stand by. I think the best security guarantee for Ukraine is NATO. It is the most trusted. It is the most tested. It's the most trained. It's the most capable. It's the most credible threat to the Russians if they were to invade. So I think at some time in the future, Ukraine will be in NATO. It's not going to happen soon. Not going to happen tomorrow. Not even next year. But sometime, yes, I believe Ukraine will be in NATO.
So very briefly, because we're running out of time, but so you still believe NATO membership, or indeed those NATO-style security guarantees that we've heard about when it comes to Ukraine as well, that they are still enough for Vladimir Putin to sit up in the Kremlin, to take notice, and of course to, above all, stay away?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I believe that, Aaron. That Article 5 commitment that all nations make to all NATO nations make to all other NATO nations is strong. It's been tested. It is credible. And so nothing that is going on right now would challenge that. NATO is there. It's going to defend, and Putin knows it.
William Taylor, former US ambassador to Ukraine, thank you very much for joining us on a big night here on TVP World.
Thank you, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
And that's all for World News tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World as this story develops. I'm Aaron Dahmen. Good night.